Hello and welcome to another episode. Now, we'd all love to believe all of these amazing waves around the world are open and available to anyone and everyone. However, for anyone who's surfed and traveled around the world, you'll know firsthand that this just isn't the case. And I'm not just talking about extreme localism. There are many world-class surf spots around the globe that have been privatized in the past and many that still are today. So in today's episode, we're going to be taking a bit of a dive into some of these spots. First up, we head to Fiji, specifically to the island of Tavarua. Now, this is arguably the most famous case of surf spot privatization in the world. Nowadays, anyone with a boat can surf Cloudbreak, but prior to 2010, both Cloudbreak and restaurants, the two waves that break close to Tavarua, were off limits and were exclusive to guests staying on Tavarua Island. After Cloudbreak and restaurants' discovery back in the 1980s, a small surf camp was set up on Tavarua Island. Now today, we all know Tavarua Island Resort as this plush, luxurious surf camp, but back in the day when it was first set up, it was far from that. It was essentially just a few cabanas right there on the sand, only had electricity during the day, and there was only 24 guests allowed to stay at any one time. But then came foreign investment, and with this foreign investment and some shady legislation, the company managed to acquire a private license that gave them exclusive access to the reefs surrounding Tavarua. This included both restaurants, which breaks directly off Tavarua, and the nearby reef where Cloudbreak is. Now, this license gave Tavarua Island the exclusive rights to be able to surf these waves. So only guests that were paying and staying on Tavarua Island specifically could surf them, meaning other traveling surfers and even the locals couldn't surf the waves. And the fact that it cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to even come and stay and surf it, it was excellent for those who could afford it. You know, you could just pay the money and stay on Tavarua and have access to these amazing waves and know that you and the people at the camp are going to be the only ones surfing it. It's amazing. But for those of us who didn't have that money, it's not so great, especially for the locals. While this might make it seem that, you know, the island resort and the company that invested and acquired this license is the most evil company in the world in terms of surfing, they actually did a hell of a lot for the Fijian islands, you know, putting money into the economy, helping to develop villages, build churches and hospitals, and employing lots of local people. So while on one hand you've got this shady exclusive license for a natural resource like a wave, you've then got the money that was put into the Fiji Islands and the support that it gave to local people. So there's definitely two sides to it. But in July 2010, things changed forever. The Fijian Tourism Board decided to lift the exclusivity rights on the reefs in an effort to attract more surf tourism to the Fiji Islands and open the reefs up to local surfers. And that meant that from that point on, surfers from all around the world, regardless of where they were staying in Fiji, could come and surf Cloudbreak and restaurants. So while this is great for the wider surfing community, it meant that surfers could come and surf these amazing waves and locals could get a taste of waves that were literally in their backyards. For regular guests and for those guests that had already booked to stay at Tavarua, it was devastating. You know, people had paid hundreds or even thousands of dollars to come and stay and have this exclusive wave. But when the ban was lifted, a lot of these guests cancelled, and Tavarua Island Resort was almost going to close because of this. Obviously, it didn't end up happening and it became a championship tour venue again. Today, it attracts surfers from all over the world. It's this famous, amazing wave. There's a really sick documentary called Thundercloud. It explains the rights to the reef and the exclusivity license thing in a lot more detail. So I'll leave the documentary link down in the description where you can check it out. You have to buy it, but it's only like 10, 15 bucks or something. It's well worth it. So over to the Maldives now, and there are multiple waves in the Maldives Islands that are exclusive. And even to this day, you're not allowed to surf them. So Pasta Point, Lohis, Kanduma, they're basically all privatized and you're not allowed to surf them unless you stay at the specific resort on that island. So these resorts on these islands, they own legal exclusivity rights to the reefs surrounding their islands and therefore the waves that break over them. So in the Maldives, you've got so many amazing waves, but 3 of the best ones you can't surf unless you pay thousands of dollars to stay at these resorts. You know, these places are hundreds or even thousands of dollars per night. So unless you've got that sort of cash, you can't surf these waves. So the Maldives are really interesting because it's obviously a perfect tropical surf destination with amazing waves, but it's also really crowded because of the mellow nature of the waves, and it's just this paradisical place. You've got these 3 private waves that are exclusive to people who can afford it, and then you've got the other waves which are still really good but so crowded at these other spots, it's like condensed the crowd. So I guess one of the reasons that these resorts fought so hard to get this exclusive license and offer this amazing experience to their guests was because the Maldives were getting so crowded that all of these spots were amazing, but it was kind of ruining the experience because there was just so many people coming there. So the privatization of these 3 breaks has just ruined the surf experience even more for anyone who can't afford it. So if you go to places like Cokes or Chickens, there's like 30, 40 more people out every single day, almost no matter what the conditions. In 2012, a Singapore-based company came to the Maldives to invest and set up another resort. This time it was on the island of, I have no idea how you pronounce this to be honest, but Thurunburu. Thurunburu? Yeah, I'm not gonna try again with that one. Now there are 2 amazing waves that break off this island, Sultans and Honkies, and this company wanted to set up a resort on the island and claim the exclusive rights to these 2 waves, meaning that there would literally only be 2 or 3 waves left to surf in the northern atolls. But the plans were met with outrage from the local surfers and the global surfing community, and it didn't end up happening. So yeah, those breaks remain open, but it's quite a scary prospect that some of the other waves in the Maldives can suddenly just be taken away because of these exclusivity rights. So yeah, Maldives, it's a tricky one. You're either paying thousands of dollars to stay at these resorts and surf some of these waves, or you're battling the crowds in the ones that are still open. I'm not sure what happens if you go and try and surf these waves. Like, if you've ever done it, please let me know. I'd love to know what actually happens. You know, if you just go, fuck it, I'm just gonna jump off the boat, or I'm just gonna go paddle out past a point. Like, do you get arrested? Do you get shot? What happens? So next we head to southern Mexico, and Mexico's most famous right-hand point's in that Salina Cruz region. So what most people don't know, and what I didn't know when I first went there, is that you can't just go and surf those waves. You have to either stay at the resort, like Punta Conejo Resort or Las Palmeras, all those places, or you have to hire a local guide, which can cost anywhere between $100 and $200 per day. Without this, you're not surfing those points. I don't think these resorts and guides have any sort of legal hold over these waves, but it's Mexico and there's a lot of corruption, and it's not the kind of place where you want to get on the wrong side of the locals. And I've tried to surf them. When I went to Mexico a couple of years ago, got a hotel in Salina Cruz town, which is a bit away from these waves actually, and then took a taxi from there to like where the road ends, and then I walked a mile or 2 down the beach. And it was so hot, and I just walked for miles, but I was just so keen to surf. And eventually, as I was walking, like the waves came into view, and I was like, oh, this is sick. It was like, you know, classic like Mexican point. And then as I got nearer and nearer, I like got so excited. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna be able to surf it. This is sick. But then as I was walking up the point, I just heard a whistle, and I was like, oh no. My heart just sank, and I turned around and there's like a big Mexican guy like storming towards me, and I was like, oh fuck. So he came over, and he was pretty friendly to be fair, but he just told me that I couldn't surf. And I was like, oh my God. So we like stood there for a minute, and I was like trying to explain to him that I just walked all the way from town. I was like, mate, I've just walked all the way from Salina, you know? I was like drenched in sweat, and I was like, just looked devastated, and I was like trying to plead my case, and he was just like, yeah, no surfing, you can't surf here, you've got to be staying at the camps, or you've got to pay X amount of money. And I had a few pesos just in my boardie's pocket, like $20, $30 worth, like nothing. And at first he asked me for like $100 worth of pesos, and I was like, mate, I've just got this. And I just pulled out like just this crumpled like little pile of notes. It was just such a measly offering. And he just like kind of looked at me and like, I think he felt a bit sorry for me, and like kind of started laughing. And he's like, oh, okay, pay me that and I'll let you surf for a few hours. And I was like, yes. I was like, I got in. If you want to read that story in more detail, it's in my book, which is being shamelessly plugged right now behind me. It's in the Mexico section on this bit. So if you want to read that in more detail, I'll leave the link in the description. So yeah, they are 3 of the most notorious cases of surf spot privatization. Please let me know your opinion of surf spots being privatized. Obviously they're natural resources, and I strongly disagree with it, but at the same time, if you've got the money, it's so appealing because you're going to be able to pay and go to these waves and have only a limited amount of other surfers there, which in today's world where all these famous waves are super crowded, it's worth paying for. But because I've always been on the side of not being able to afford it, you know, I like scrape by to these surf destinations on like the lowest budget, so it always sucks for me. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I had a hell of a good time like making it and researching all of these places. For now, it's goodbye from me, and I'll see you in the next episode.